Good evening. Good evening, yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sharing your evening with us. I would like to recognize our elected officials in the room. We have Mayor Davey, we have Ambassador Laredo. To start, and we have also, I'd like to recognize our police chief, Charles Press. To start, I'd like to say that the Village of Key Biscayne is deeply committed to the safety and security of our residents. Public safety is a core pillar of our local government. We are humbled for the opportunity to be gathered together as a community tonight so we can share with you an overview of our police department, and we thank you. So how many of you would agree that we have some of the best policing and public safety staff officials in the room? Excellent. And how many of us simply want to learn more about the police department and how we do business? Right. So that's why we're here. There are plenty of interactions that we all have with our police officers. We have coffee with the cops. I don't know if any of you have enjoyed that, but it's quite a nice opportunity to get to know some of the officers who keep us safe. But how many of us know the intricacies of how the department operates? Did you know we have 36 sworn officers who work tirelessly to ensure the safety of our residents? We have 11 civilians that work in the police department supporting those officers, or that we have policies ranging from how we provide bicycle patrol, how we use our body cameras, how we interact with people living with autism, and how we respond to high-risk situations. Tonight, we'll have the opportunity to learn more about what goes on behind the scenes, the best practices and policies. We will invite you to ask any questions that you may have of our local police force and its practices. And with that, I will turn the mic over to our chief, who is going to give us a presentation and overview of the department.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. And thank you all for being out here tonight. Before I get started, I would like to thank the manager for allowing me the opportunity to speak. It's not often that I get this chance that people can actually ask whatever they feel like asking. I prefer that a lot more than finding out from somebody or hearing it in a chat and not being able to respond, because I do love to answer questions. We are a very transparent organization. We have nothing to hide. I will give you direct answers tonight. If I don't have an answer to your question, my assistant, Anna Guerra, will write your name down, we'll get your email, and we'll get you that answer as quickly as possible. But I think that if you hear what we're about and if you pay attention to the things that we actually do on a daily basis, weekly basis, yearly basis, I think you'll find it pretty intriguing that your police department does a whole lot more than people actually know. And I would love to thank Ms. Guerra, who has helped me put together this beautiful PowerPoint tonight. I couldn't do that myself. I'm not a techno guy, so thankfully, I've got three of my staff members here, Lieutenant Zayas, Deputy Chief Capone, Deputy Chief Eunice. I appreciate their support. They're here tonight, and I know that several of my officers are also watching on their email. So I'm going to start out tonight by giving you a little history of Key Biscayne. And obviously, I wasn't here in 1993. I was actually with Miami Beach during that time in their police department. But I have gathered some information and how this police department kind of developed and grew, why it started out the way it did, and why we're at the place that we're at tonight. I will tell you this, that it's very interesting. We're doing this now because on February 3rd, which I think is about 2 weeks away or 2.5 weeks away, I'll actually be celebrating my 45th anniversary as a police officer here in South Florida. So when you think about, the things that have gone on in 45 years of policing in South Florida, whether it's Key Biscayne, whether it was Miami Beach, City of Miami, there's been a lot of insanity in South Florida. We had some of the worst criminal activity you could ever imagine in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. On a personal note, I have lost friends in the line of duty. I have lost several friends to their own gun. What we do for a living is difficult. what we do for a living is not the most popular thing in the world. And I always make the joke, and I wish Eric Lang were here tonight because he knows that I'm going to say this regardless, but if we wanted to be heroes, we would have been firemen, because they are magnificent people. They do great things. They save lives every day. They aren't put in a position of authority to have to take away somebody's freedom, to have to write somebody a citation, or to have to engage in a domestic disturbance where we're actually trying to keep families together rather than seeing them come to blows and fall apart. So what we do is difficult. I admire the men and women of our department, but I'm going to add one more caveat before we get started, and that's our civilian personnel. In order for any organization to work, especially a police organization, our support team is everything to us. Your budget that you pay your taxes for would be 25, 30, 40% higher if we had to use police officers to do some of the support jobs that our civilians do. And they work undercover, but what I mean by that is they're not in the spotlight. They're not here tonight. They engage. They're there to communicate with you, help you in any way, shape, or form we can provide that help. And I'm very grateful for their assistance. So let's start out with an overview of what happened in 1993. We all remember that 1992 brought Hurricane Andrew, and it was the largest natural disaster in the history of South Florida. The population of the village of Key Biscayne at the time was approximately 6,000 residents. I know I'm supposed to take this, aren't I? Okay, I apologize for that. Approximately 6,000 residents, many of whom were snowbirds. The Bill Baggs State Park was decimated by the storm and closed for major repairs and rebuilding, so that held back thousands of the annual visitors we see now. In fact, we have about 2 million annual visitors that come through your village to go to that park every year. The Miami Marine Stadium was also severely damaged and rendered uninhabitable. So all of the events that occurred on the Marine Stadium end that would cause traffic jams today as we know it, the ultras, the boat shows, the concerts, this, that, and the other, that wasn't here back then. In 1993, shortly thereafter, the village of Key Biscayne incorporated. So there were two real main reasons that we did incorporate. One was a lack of dedicated public safety and the sense of community that this brings. There's something very special when you know you have a core group of committed police officers and firefighters who learn the residents, know what the residents need, and work with them. We also had a lack of control of our zoning and our growth. And I know that Key Biscayners have turned that around. We've been able to talk about density. We've set the stage and the limits that make Key Biscayne the beautiful island it is today. The original chief of police served from 1993 to 2003. And based on all the above demographics, the department consisted only of 30 sworn officers and a handful of civilian personnel. The initial services were limited predominantly to patrol of the village streets. At one time, they tried a very small marine patrol. They bought a used boat until it broke down, and it kind of went by the wayside. But it was kind of literally almost to create that sense of community with the police department and the people who lived here, something that they lacked because of the fact that the county at the time, and still to this day, only provides 2 police officers on this causeway per shift. And that's if they have the availability of those 2 police officers. So these were some of the reasons that you all incorporated, brought your police. Following the chief's retirement, the village established a public safety director overseeing both police and fire. And a short while later, the decision to conduct a national search for a police chief was determined to be in the best interest of the village. And I began my tenure in July of 2004. The first order of business and the direction from the council and the manager at the time was to accredit this agency, to bring policies, procedures, and administrative orders for conducting every police operation that we do. This was successfully accomplished in February of 2005 by the Commission for Florida Accreditation. Since then, our department has been reaccredited, which you have to go through every 3 years, 4 consecutive flawless reviews. And when I say flawless, that means that every one of the standards that we have to comply with, the 241 standards, and proofs of those standards over a 3-year period have to be perfect. We have to walk our talk. We could still get accredited if we have a faux pas here or there, but in order to be established as flawless, we have to be perfect. And this is an agency that comes out of the state of Florida. It has nothing to do with who we pick or how we pick them. It's a commission of chiefs of police and sheriffs from all over the state of Florida. They have worked together to create best practices for police departments and the functions of those departments, and they're the ones who send their teams down every 3 years to review us. In addition to achieving accreditation, a review of departmental staffing was conducted to establish best use of personnel. So I spent the first 6 months while I was here pushing for accreditation, but at the same time taking a look at how we staffed here. And for instance, I'm going to bring a point out. We had a sergeant of police, a very tenured sergeant. She was making a very high salary, and she was in charge of the evidence and property room. Now, our property room probably takes in anywhere from 100 to 120 pieces of evidence or property a year. It made no sense to have a sergeant of police in that office for 40 hours a week. So what I did was I transferred her to the patrol division so we would have another cop out on the street, and we used one of our civilians that was already here within the police department, trained that young man. He became our custodian in our property and evidence room. Not only did we have a substantial salary saving, he became the property and evidence technician of the year for the state of Florida shortly thereafter. The police department reorganized to provide flexibility in shifts, allowing for more administrative control and less need for additional supervisors. So what I mean by that was we were currently at the time going on 8-hour shifts. Every 8 hours, we had a new squad and a new sergeant. By going to the predominantly 12-hour shifts, we were able to reduce the sergeants from 6 to 4 and take those 2 positions that were supervisory positions, make them police officers. So we actually had the same amount of staff, but we had more cops actually answering calls for service, and they were still provided the proper supervision and what we call a span of control, which is anywhere from 4 to 6 people per supervisor to have proper control systems in place. Shortly thereafter, I guess a few years later, realizing the absolute need for a Marine Patrol here in the village. And I want to go back historically, and I know that a lot of you remember, there was chaos in those waters right off of our village. Mashta Flats, or the Tainter Flats as they're now referred to, was absolute party central. People were dying. People were getting hurt on a daily basis. We had fights that were just disproportionate to anybody's mind thought. I mean, you would go out there, there'd be 500 boats, and there would be chaos every weekend. And in fact, unfortunately, my daughter was one of those critically injured people out there. But during that time, once we got our Marine Patrol, they made all the difference in the world, and we actually were able to change the law, believe it or not, and create a new rafting law in South Florida, which allowed access for police boats and fire boats to get in and out of the chaos over there much quicker, to take action, and we were able to curtail the problem. And I'm pleased to say, I'm thankful to, that there have been no major injuries and no deaths in many years. And the quality of life for our people who live on the water has changed dramatically. So let's fast forward to today. The village has over 13,000 residents, and we're visited by a minimum of about 2 million people a year who just go to the state park.
That doesn't mean the people who come to Key Biscayne who want to go to our hotels, want to visit our restaurants, want to go to some of our other beaches. That's just people traveling to and from, not residents, outsiders, as I call them. And 30,000 cars a day travel in and out of your village. It's a staggering number, but the numbers are legitimate. We had our traffic people do the numbers. We have close to 10 million cars a year on that causeway out there. So when you start doing the math, they actually float down here, and the amount of traffic here is just overwhelming for the one road in and one road out. And that's why we've had many of our traffic issues. So what did we do? We responded to that. We created a traffic unit using motorcycles and vehicle patrols. The reason for that was the best deterrent and the best way to get in and out of traffic, especially in highly congested areas, is a motorcycle unit. And they have proved invaluable when we've had critical incidents on the causeway, when we've had our weekends where there's no movement at all, ultra boat show weekends when we have to figure out how to move traffic in and out, but a police car would take 45 minutes to get out there versus a police motorcycle that could be out there within 5 to 10 minutes working their way through traffic. And we also recently, about a year and a half ago, due to the complexity of white-collar crimes and to better serve our victims of crimes, we increased our detective bureau from 1 detective to 2 detectives. Keep in mind, we're maintaining our staffing levels. We increased our staffing for Marine Patrol, and we increased our staffing for our traffic unit. So that was a total of 4 in the last 6 years, 4 additional personnel. Utilizing our current personnel, a new crime scene investigator, a civilian who works within our department already, was trained and developed to assist in solving crimes. This became necessary because Miami-Dade County Police Department does not respond with their crime scene unit to any criminal activity on Key Biscayne unless it is a grievous, heinous crime. They are overwhelmed with their own crime scenes that they have to deal with in the county, so they simply don't respond. Through our mutual aid and our just literally begging friendships with City of Miami Beach and City of Hialeah police departments, we've actually had them come over and send their own crime scene unit at no cost to the village of Key Biscayne, and they've literally helped us solve some of the crimes that we've had here. So we identified the fact that we would like to have our own person. That same person, by the way, serves as our property and evidence tech, our CAD RMS administrator, so the CAD is our computer system and our records management system, and as needed, she's a dispatcher. So we've got 4 people in one who are going to be able to do all of those different jobs. This past year, as we all know, and unfortunately, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act created another difficult need for the village of Key Biscayne to staff the schools. The Miami-Dade County School Board Police is responsible for staffing a cop at every public school in Miami-Dade County. However, after this act, they realized that they just didn't have the staffing. They're about 150 to 175 police officers short. So they reached out to municipalities throughout Miami-Dade County and Miami-Dade County Police in order to have a school resource at all of these schools. The village agreed that it's our job to protect our children, that we didn't want to wait 3, 4, 5, 6 years for the school board police to hire enough people to help us out. So we have dedicated 2 of our officers, the impact being we had to reduce our Marine Patrol services, but it was one of those take from Peter to pay Paul, because what was the most important and what is our most important commodity here in the village? It's our children. So it was a no-brainer. On top of that, we're fortunate enough that the school board, through grants and through some of their salary structuring, has agreed to pay the village and other municipalities upwards to $70,000 a year per police officer for reimbursement until they can actually staff those positions. And then most recently, several Key Biscayne officers, including all of command staff, so all of these gentlemen here, myself, were certified in police bicycle training courses and have already begun implementing weekly rides, resulting in increased visibility and community policing within the village. So by the numbers, as the manager alluded to earlier, we have 36 sworn police officers and 11 civilians that provide 24-hour daily patrol, 24-hour communications, and in that we spend about 2,100 hours per year in training those officers and those civilians to be the most competent personnel that we can have. So we have yearly approximately 16,000 calls for service, which include our watch orders, our directed patrols, traffic stops. When the officers see a crime opportunity, they put a notice on your door saying you left your car unlocked, you left your bike in the middle of the yard, your garage door was open. We do crime prevention services, surveys. We've had major event support that doesn't always get reimbursed. So we know that Ultra hit us hard for thousands of dollars in overtime costs and no reimbursement. The boat show has also hit us hard. But if we don't provide the proper staffing for those major events that come through, we leave the village at a disadvantage, and we can't afford to do that. So these are some of the things that we do. And then, of course, anytime you call 911 or 365-5555, those are citizen requests that we respond to. So this is our org chart, our organizational chart. And this is kind of just a brief overview of how we're set up as a police department. So you've got the chief of police who oversees the deputy chiefs, one of administration, one of operations, and included in that we have an executive administrative assistant who, as the senior, also does all of our accounts payable, pays our bills, helps me put together our budget every year. We have the executive administrative assistant who not only handles all walk-ups into the police station and into the chief's office, but she also conducts bike registration, dog registration, and at times golf cart registration when we need. We've got our fiscal activities that kind of all of us at the top levels have to oversee. We've got our field operations division, and that includes everybody you see in a uniform that's actually out on the street, or a detective, or in some cases there may be, in the past, we had a task force officer. So anybody who's actually doing police work falls under the field operations division. And if you look at the way our patrol is set up, you've got a patrol lieutenant who oversees all 4 squads. So we're on 12-hour shifts. We have squad A, B, C, and D. And I'll get more detailed into that in a few minutes. We've got our special ops lieutenant who oversees report review, off-duty, special events, investigations, traffic unit, DARE, reserve program, our chaplain program, our honor guard, and our Marine Patrol. And then we have one administrative lieutenant who oversees internal affairs, which involves doing division-level investigations and major investigations, facilities management, forfeitures, fleet maintenance, municipal utility workers. We've got an administrative services coordinator that I spoke about earlier who handles our administrative CAT RMS, our crime scene investigation, property and evidence, and she also works with the community on our red light camera issues. We have the executive services administrator, and that would be this young lady right here. And Anna is in charge of accreditation. She does our grants. She handles all of our personnel issues. She handles all of our training, whether it's planning for it, documenting it, ensuring that we follow all the state-mandated guidelines for our training, and special projects that are given to her by her boss, which kind of makes her life pretty miserable. And included, we have an IT gentleman who oversees all of our IT. We do background investigations. We have court liaison, somebody who deals directly with the courts. We have a communication supervisor and dispatchers who oversee policy and make sure that your 24-hour communications, which, by the way, is not a 9/11 center, and we know that, right? 9/11 is over in the county. We are simply a 24-hour way for you to call us and ask for any services that you would like to perform. Now I'll break it down even more for you. So when you look at a daily, let's go back. When you look at what we do on a day, normal day, you've got a day shift sergeant of A platoon, the Alpha platoon. You've got hopefully 4 officers that work that day. That's minimum staffing, and you have a dispatcher. That's Alpha Bravo. That's our day shift crew. And then we have our midnight shift crew, Charlie and Delta platoons. Also, since late November of last year, they now have 1 and 4, 1 supervisor and 4 officers. So I think we all remember the crime spree that we had in later October and early in November last year. We made a decision to take a look at how we staff and decided to increase our staffing on midnight shift, which again, because we can't ask for more police officers right now, it impacts what we were doing before. So in other words, we took away our task force officer. That task force officer, by the way, worked for the IRS as a local task force which identified drug money, illegal drug money. And with that, in the past 10 years, we have confiscated upwards to approximately $750,000, which have bought boats, they've bought special equipment, specialized uniform gear, you name it. We've actually been able to purchase 2 boats. We bought special equipment for our cars. We've managed to buy special equipment, keeping the village of Key Biscayne taxes at a lower rate and our budget at a lower rate because we're not using your money. We're very happy to take it from the dopers and use their money. Unfortunately, because of manpower needs, we had to pull that detective out of that task force and increase our officers on midnight because it just had to be. We had to stop the bleeding. You've got our lieutenant on special patrol, and like I said before, special patrol on a daily basis would consist of 2 school resource officers. One of them is for our K-8, and then one of the officers shares with the private parochial schools to ensure that they have an SRO. We have our 2 Marine Patrol officers on weekends all the time. And if possible, we try to put out a boat during the week if we have an excessive amount of personnel. But if you recall, I told you once we had those 2 school resource officers, we had to reduce our weekday patrolling in our Marine Patrol. We have our 2 detectives, and we have 2 motormen. So our motorcycles are on duty 7 days a week. We have motorcycles out here. Our detectives work traditional 5-day weeks. And then we shift over into our administrative area, and you've got your IT, your administrative CSI, which is crime scene, property and evidence, the things that I explained to you before. Our municipal utility worker, who, by the way, is, and I don't mean to say this in a negative way, he is our lowest salaried employee and the most amazing employee we have. In fact, he was our Civilian of the Year this year. All this guy loves to do is whatever you ask him to do, from helping the manager and things that they need upstairs to doing things for the courts, doing things for our attorneys. Very, very hardworking gentleman, does a great job. And our fleet maintenance coordinator. And since the council made the decision to have an overall fleet policy, we now have one person who coordinates every vehicle within the village of Key Biscayne, with the exception of those 2 big, pretty fire trucks that are next door and those 2 rescue vans. So some of the services and programs that we provide. Our DARE and our school resource officer. These programs impact several thousand of our Key Biscayne children every year. Officers are chosen for their ability to relate to the youth in our community, to our parents and teachers, and most importantly, to respond immediately to any dangerous incident or incidents within their schools. Some of the programs include anti-bullying presentations. The last 2 years, we brought in that special guy retro bill from around the United States, Red Ribbon Week, DARE courses, Halloween safety presentations. Our crime prevention program, the Key Biscayne Police Department offers crime prevention surveys to all residents and business owners in the community. Specifically, they reach out to victims of crimes who wish to harden their homes or businesses by having somebody survey their properties and offer them ideas to harden up their properties. Our Marine Patrol unit, the impact of our Marine Patrol unit resulted in a major decrease in injuries and deaths on our waterways. They have curtailed quality of life problems originating on the water and affecting our citizens who live in waterfront properties. In addition, with their support, we were able to request and receive a change in the Miami-Dade County boating ordinance regarding rafting. This new change has reflected greatly towards increasing the safety of the waterways. The traffic unit. This addition to our daily patrol activities has had the most defined impact on the reduction of roadway violations within our community. And although, as Ceci and I spoke about earlier today, although we still have problems, the unit is directly responsible for making our streets safer for our children, pedestrians, and our cyclists. Our bicycle unit. One common complaint in the past from residents has been a lack of visibility of our officers. When you've only got 3 or 4 officers working out on the street, you're not going to see them all the time. So we responded to that. We created a new bicycle unit. Officers and residents are engaging in more face-to-face communication. It's been a very interesting dynamic. The manager told me this was going to be a very positive thing. I was not quite so sure. I knew the shopping centers, it would be something that would be positive, but I didn't know the impact it would have in our neighborhoods, and it has. People love seeing our cops out there on bikes. They stop, they talk to residents. It's been a great increase in our community policing program. And the Village of Key Biscayne Police Department registers all golf carts, bicycles, and pets in the Village of Key Biscayne. We also maintain one of those scanners, so anybody who has a pet and they have the little chip in their animal, we have returned 98% of all animals we found to their rightful owners. And they live a pretty good life while they're in our police station. They have their own room. It used to be a jail, and now it serves as their own kennel, and we give them real good service over there. And it allows us, to help our citizens identify some of the lost and stolen properties that they have. So this is the interesting part of what people don't realize our cops do. So our uniformed police officers are responsible for the following. They're responsible for calls for service, traffic enforcement, the preliminary investigation of crimes, preliminary traffic crash investigations. They're responsible for directed patrols, watch orders. They do park and walks where they park their car, they get out, and they walk around. They serve as auxiliary Marine Patrol officers, meaning if we're short one day and we need to put an extra officer on a boat, they're certified in those things. They're certified on the ATV for the beach patrol. All of these certifications are mandated and required by the state in order for us to actively engage in those processes. So these cops have to be specialized. They go to court appearances and they get on their bicycle patrols. That's just the regular uniform guy that you see driving around the street. Our traffic unit officers handle traffic enforcement details, saturation patrols. They address specific traffic complaints. If somebody says they're speeding on Sunrise, they'll set up speed traps on Sunrise. They do traffic crash follow-up reports. They also handle calls for service if we're inundated with calls, and then they go back to their traffic duties. They do all traffic data and analysis. They do citation audits. They handle the red light camera program. They put out those smart trailers that you see out there that tell people that they're speeding, which is really interesting on the key, by the way, because when you put out one of those trailers, it actually reduces the speeding. I would love to have a secret trailer after they go past that trailer, because we all see when you pass a cop car on the causeway and everybody's going slow, and the second they go past that car that's sitting in the median, it's a raceway. Well, they do probably the same on the trailers, so our traffic cops are smart enough to wait a little bit past it and do the things that they need to do. They also have to attend court. Detectives do follow-up investigations. They review every crime report that's written in the village. They handle our UCR statistics. So this is one of the most important things that we do. This is mandated by the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They document every crime in every state, city, municipality, county, and they add all the crime statistics for every government agency in the United States. Our guys have to put together those reports. They identify crime trends. They issue bolos, a bolo, be on the lookout. So they'll put out flyers to the police officers and to other agencies when they've identified bad guys, including photographs, including names. They were successful last year in actually identifying the two major international crime rings that were affecting the village of Key Biscayne. Went all the way out to L.A. They identified the bad guys in L.A., found them in Chile. That's what they were doing when they were analyzing the crime trends. They close out cases. They partner and network with neighboring agencies. And like I say, they cleared the major Miami Beach crime issue on that auto theft. The city of Miami that was hit by the same guys that we were hit by in Pinecrest and Coral Gables, our cops were the ones who identified those burglars. Turned out to be a major ring in Chile, out of Chile, and they actually tracked the bad guys to Chile and two of them to L.A., notified the FBI, and the FBI picked up the other two in Los Angeles. And they'll be facing charges in L.A., several states, all the way down here to Miami. That was our two detectives that did that work. And, of course, they have to appear in court all the time. Our Marine Patrol cops, they may be used as street cops if we're a little short-handed one day. They'll handle calls for service. They do directed patrols. During these major events, our Marine Patrol guys go 24 hours a day. They're out there at nighttime. They're out there at daytime. They do watch orders. They do waterway safety enforcements. They write hundreds of safety stop checks a year, hundreds of them. They have a right to board any vessel and check for safety equipment. Countless work that they do out there. The quality of life issues that we had when we had these blaring, insane parties on the water where the residents couldn't even go out in their backyards on a weekend. It was terrible. And they created, these people created what I called white noise, just massive amounts of noise. Our officers were able to push them back as far away as we legally could push them back. They wrote citations for excessive noise, and they were able to curtail the issue and give our residents a better life for those big taxes that they pay over there on the water. They handle vessel crash reports. They assist uniform patrol. And again, they also have to go to court. Our Crime Prevention and Community Resource Unit, that's our DARE officer, our school security officers, our We Care program. Is everybody aware of the We Care program? So the We Care program is when you go to a shopping center and you see that sign with a badge on it and says the Key Biscayne Police Department is authorized to act as an agent for the owner of that property in case somebody is trespassing. A lot of the condos have put it out there, and they put them on their pool fences and things like that. In other words, the manager of a restaurant, of a shopping center, is not always available. So they sign a contract with the Key Biscayne Police to act in their special interest and their best interest. In case we have issues with a person, we can cite them for trespassing, order them as agents not to return, and if they do return at a later time, we can take them to jail. So it's been a great crime prevention program for our folks. They do the crime prevention details. They conduct property on-site security surveys. By the way, our one lieutenant who does this, Lieutenant Danny Valdez, he has to attend 3 conferences a year just to remain certified in crime prevention. It's a national certification, very difficult because crime prevention techniques are changing all the time. And in order to maintain that standard and to do those surveys for you all, he has to go to those classes and maintain a certification. We resolve neighborhood quality of life issues. We do outreach for community leaders and residents. We host community meetings. We've done meetings in several restaurants. We've done our cops and coffee at Starbucks. We've done Public Safety Day where we invite the entire community to come out there and meet our cops and see the things we do, look at our equipment, talk to the cops, throw baseballs so they can knock me in the dunk tank and things like that. And it seems our juveniles really enjoy knocking me into the water. And we issue public safety and crime prevention tips, which you will see every once in a while. So this is some of our performance measures, and it's really hard for you all to see. So this is from October of 2018 all the way through December of 2019. So I'll go down. We've got 51 of our crime cases we had were cleared either by arrest or identifying the subject and putting a warrant in the National Crime Center so that if another cop picks the guy up, they can arrest him. We had 219 traffic crashes. We averaged anywhere from 12 to 14 a month. We had a few spikes here and there. By the way, more than 50% of our traffic accidents occur where? Does anybody know? Parking lots. It's just, we know how crazy that is. So that's where the majority of them happen. We put out 62 PSAs, public service announcements, just letting you all know what, when, what's going on, if there's an issue out there. And the difficulty of a PSA is how many times do we put it out? Is 10 times a day too much if we know we've got a big deal going on? Or is every 2 hours, 3 hours? So we try and work with our administration, our bosses, to determine how often we should do that and the best way of putting those out. Our average emergency response time is 3 minutes. Our average regular response time is 5 minutes and 34 seconds. Now, I'm going to explain to you response time. If anybody is aware of how we do our police communications, we have a dispatcher who sits in our office, and if you call 365-5555 and report a crime, that dispatcher gets on the radio and reaches out to the Miami-Dade County 911 dispatcher to tell them that we've got a crime at this location or a traffic crash. We've got Unit 1 and Unit 2, let's say, who are available for that. The dispatcher then from Miami-Dade County reaches those same units, dispatches the call to them, and those units are then sent out there to answer the calls. It's a very convoluted, very slow system. If the county radio is hot, and by hot I mean things are going on, our dispatcher has to sit back and wait and get in line almost based on a priority of when we can get in there. Now, God forbid we get a 911 call here. She'll announce that priority immediately. The county shuts down everything else, and they prioritize our call. 911 calls to the county, and we have spoken at length with our boss and myself and Chief Lang. It's probably the most difficult thing that we have because 911 calls get trunked directly to Miami-Dade County for police and fire. If it's for fire, Miami-Dade County then has to call the City of Miami Fire Department, who then calls the Key Biscayne Fire Department to first slide down those poles, jump in their trucks, and go respond. Our calls for service happen somewhat similarly, but they go from Miami-Dade County to our dispatcher to ascertain if we have any units available. She'll tell them. It goes back to the Miami-Dade dispatcher, who then dispatches the calls for service. The biggest problem we have right now, and I know I saw something in the Islander about cell service and cell towers. There is no controlling at times where your 911 call goes. In days past, when there were hard lines, landlines, and everybody used a landline, 911 pinpointed the location of that call immediately and could dispatch that call right away. There are times now, and unfortunately it's happened multiple times to us, where when you call on a cell phone, that cell signal bounces around, not necessarily to Miami-Dade. We've had cell phone calls bounce to City of Miami Beach, City of Coral Gables, City of Hialeah, and when you tell them you've got a problem at the Ritz-Carlton and it's on Ocean Lane Drive and you need somebody right away and it's a Hialeah dispatcher, you can understand the difficulty in the situation we're in right now. And that has caused major delays. And all of these things come into the timing of what a real response time is. But I would tell you that if the call comes directly to the key, the average time it would take a cop to run to your home in a extreme emergency would be a minute to 2 minutes. Uniform traffic citations. In that time period, we wrote 1,744 traffic citations on this little island. Majority of them being written by our traffic unit. And when I talk about traffic citations, I'm not talking about somebody who's got a tail light out, and I'm not talking about somebody who doesn't carry their registration, all of which go on a uniform traffic citations. These are legitimate, dangerous traffic violations that they write. They write running stop signs. They write running red lights. They write running our lovely yield signs that nobody seems to pay any attention to in the roundabouts, and it's a dog-eat-dog out there. They write speeding tickets. So we literally write very difficult, strong state statute traffic violations, 1,744 of them last year.
What percent of those golf carts, please?
I've got some golf cart stats. They're nowhere near that, obviously, because the majority of our violations are of those 30,000 cars a year traveling back and forth. And I'll pick up those golf cart stats in a minute. So we wrote 441 parking tickets. We had 1,628 red light violations. That, by the way, are all caught on camera, so they are as legitimate as anything else. We wrote 700 traffic warnings. That means if somebody was speeding at 6 miles an hour over or 7 over, we stopped them, we corrected them, we educated them, and we wrote a warning to let them know. And that warning, by the way, folks, goes into a system. So if we stop that car the next time and we ask that dispatcher, have there been any previous? Yes, they were warned for speeding. Then that officer takes direct action and will write a citation in that case. Golf carts, citations, and warnings, 295. We had 11 loose dog calls, 2 noise complaints. We had 39 arrests this year. Folks, making arrests in the village of Key Biscayne is rare because we don't have a lot of crime. Those 39 arrests, 85 or 86% of them were for felonies, were for auto burglary, auto theft, or home burglary. Residential burglary, could be home or apartment. So they're great arrests, hard work, follow-up investigations. Crime of opportunity notices, folks. We saw 914 opportunities for people to commit crimes last year in your village. And those were the ones we saw where the cops stopped and wrote you a little notice, left it on your door, and said your garage door open, like I said before. Bike was out here. Your car was left unlocked, this, that, or the other. 914, think about that. Those are opportunities for bad guys to do bad things. Our watch orders, we handle 565 watch orders. That is your community asking us to take a special look at your place when you go on vacation. Watch your cars. You've got something going on. You got a construction job going on, and you've had some people hanging around construct. Anything you need where you're asking your police department to respond and go by at least once, twice a day, that's a watch order, and that's what we do, over 5,000 of them. And then, of course, there's the more serious ones. Every time in the past year, we've, as you all are aware, there is a spike in anti-Semitism and attacks on synagogues and Jewish people. So when we see something happening hot wherever it is, we'll start doing a every hour watch order if we know we have to do that, just to ensure that that place of worship has a constant police presence. And we do that for anybody, by the way. That would be regardless. If you had a threat on your life, we've had domestic situations where we know we've got an active, bad domestic partner that is threatening to come back at any moment. We will go, we'll knock on the door, we'll park a police car out if we've got a spare police car in front of the house, just to kind of give that person a little bit of an extra feeling of security. We'll direct our officers to write their reports in the front yard. And the great thing is a lot of our residents will invite us. If you have a cop wants to write a report, come in the front yard, we'll bring them coffee, we'll give them a glass of water, we'll do whatever we need to do. We're there and we're available for those services. We did 591 business checks, 437 area checks, 747 parking walks. That's 747 times. That's at least twice a day. Cops get out of their cars and they walk either a neighborhood, a shopping center, a condo, and just kind of walk around, be seen, and get back in their cars. And 5,005 directed patrols last year. That's us telling the cops that whenever you're not doing any of those other things that they're all doing, they have a certain zone and an area that they have to respond to. And they literally call it off on the radio, and they say, I'll be in zone 3 on a directed patrol until notified to take a call or something else. Our community bike rides, we just started that this year, but we had 10 of them already in December alone. We scheduled 12 of them, but unfortunately, due to inclement weather, we had to cancel a couple of them. We had 52 dare events. Actually, we had more. I just don't have the total. We had 52 in December and November. We are doing dare classes all the time, and then the special events that we do to bring our kids together. We work very closely with the Principals Coalition on all of our dare activities. And so far, we have not tracked any actual bullying cases. There have been reports of potential bullying, but we don't actually take those statistics. If it happens in the school, Miami-Dade School Board Police is responsible for that. That becomes their crime activity, and they do the report, and it goes under Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So the reason maybe a lot of you are here, policies and procedures of the police department, why we do what we do. So as I started out saying, we are an accredited agency, one of over 200 police departments in the state of Florida that have the Florida accreditation. And we have 243 mandated standards that the Village of Key Biscayne must comply with annually to remain accredited. Mandated, I'll say that one more time. We have no choice. If we are to remain accredited, these policies, these mandated things we must do. We must have a car policy. We must have a uniform policy. We must have a certain way that we respond to a domestic violence call. We have to give out certain pamphlets as part of that call. We have certain crime responsibilities to a victim. that we have to follow. We have guidelines on chases. We have guidelines on arrests. We have guidelines on radio procedures, forfeitures, what our Marine Patrol can and cannot do. Whatever you think that we do, there are these things that mandate best practice and how to do that. Now, with that, we create a regulations manual based on those 243 mandates. That's how we develop our policies. Those policies and procedures are best practices. They are approved by the chief of police, and more importantly, they are approved by the Florida Accreditation Commission. If they don't follow best practice, we fail as an accredited agency. So I am not going to sit here and go over every one of those policies, procedures, but I'm now going to allow the floor to be yours. And you can ask me whatever you want. We're going to shut down this PowerPoint, and Anna's going to bring up our policies, our procedures. So if you have a specific question, we'll bring it up. I'll kind of take you through it. You can talk about it, whatever it is you feel like doing. I would ask that we wait one person at a time. The boss will give somebody a microphone. Please speak to the mic because the audience at home will want to hear from you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Betty Sim Conroy, and I actually have 3 questions. I was one of the ones before we incorporated that went around trying to educate the people out here about incorporation. And one promise that we made, we said, we are such a small community, and when we get our own police force, they will know our names. And I guess I would want to ask you if, like, for example, if you ask your police officers, do you know 50 people in the key? Do you know their names? Do you ever ask them anything like that?
No, I don't, ma'am. I don't ask them that.
Well, I just thought I'd use that.
And I'm going to tell you that I think the people in this community know more of our names than we know of their names. Now, I can look around this room and I can name a bunch of people, but I can't name 13,600 residents.
No, I'm just asking 50.
You know, but they know them by face. They know their needs. They know their responses. And I'm going to talk about Lieutenant Zayas for a moment here. This guy is probably the most popular cop we have on this police department.
I'd love to meet him.
Everybody knows what I call the Zen master, okay? He has a way of talking to people in this community that's special, that creates a bond, and they respond to him. And that's how they respond to most of our cops. But keep in mind, our cops are doing 16,000 different things a year, and they're going call to call. And as much as I would love to say we know all those people, and I would love to say it, we don't.
Well, there's no way you can know all of them. That wasn't what I meant, obviously.
No, I understand.
No, but
Betty.
I really think
it's
that
a good point.
the police, the bicycles is such a wonderful beginning. And I would hope that rather than just 12 a month, you could expand that and do more, because that's obviously an easy way to meet people, and then, people just even recognize their faces.
Absolutely.
And I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
To address your point a little bit, it's, when Dane County was here, they would rotate officers through Key Biscayne. We always had different officers. So with our own force, yes, we do know people. A lot of us know their names.
That's great. Well, that's great. I
That's
haven't had the
Bicycle
pleasure,
Bill,
maybe because
by
I'm
the
stuck
way.
in a condo and they don't seem to come over there too often, but in the shopping centers and all would be the logical place. Anyway, just something that did happen to me. I was caught when we had that terrible accident out here, remember, on the Rickenbacker, and my friend and I had gone to a play on Miami Beach, and we came back, it was about 10 o'clock, and of course could not get back on the key. And we really had no idea what was happening. So we thought, let's call the police department. And we did, and we got a recording. And, left our number and all. We never did hear back. So I don't know if that just happened to me. And I was sad about it because I thought maybe something can be done. And maybe that was just one time.
And I could appreciate what you're saying there. So let's imagine how many calls we got during that time, and that there's one person in that office.
Yeah.
So we have had those discussions with the village manager to potentially turn that into a more well-developed communications unit where we have more than one person. But at the same time, we realize we probably will never be able to function as a true 9/11 PSAP, public safety, accepting area. But we can do a better job. It requires people. But we are in the talking stages of it because we realize that one person simply can't. And if we know ahead of time, like during Ultra, we had 2 to 3 people staffed. During the boat show, we staff it with 2. During big weekends, we staff it with 2. But otherwise, it's just one poor person in there going crazy. But it's something I'll look into.
Okay, well, my third question, one of my big issues, or one thing that I'm very concerned about, and I actually spoke to you earlier just for a minute, is the domestic violence. And your answer to me when I asked about it out here, you said that it really is quite bad. I mean, it's compared to other areas. So I have tried to contact, like, they have sources in Dade County and get some more info on it. But I thought that some kind of education starting in the schools, because I've seen a lot of people that have had serious domestic violence, and I've heard their talks, and they'll say, we went to school, we took every class. They never taught us anything about marital relations. Just, mostly that's the women, because and I I lived in the 50s and had one of those not so great husbands. And if I'd had more education, it would have really helped me. And I don't think we do that out here. And I just wondered if that could be something that maybe in the future, if we all work together with the education from the schools and the police and tried to start there.
I will, I'll direct our DARE Sergeant, Marty Santiago, who works in concert with our Principals Coalition, to talk about maybe sending, because we have a pamphlet for domestic violence. It talks about secure places for mothers and children to go during these times. It talks about their victims' rights. And maybe we can actually start incorporating that in a take-home packet if the principals agree to it. There's a really interesting dynamic that goes on in our public schools. And the mandates that allow them to do things that maybe not are part of the normal curriculum are taboo. Our private schools, on the other hand, which have a few thousand students or a couple thousand, they can pretty much set their own standard and do what they want. So we will reach out to them. We'll talk to them. Domestic violence, I could tell you, has been on an upswing in South Florida. When I was with Miami Beach, we actually created the first ever domestic violence unit in all of Miami-Dade County because it was so prevalent on Miami Beach. And we did some really good things over there. But again, manpower intensive. Our goal is to, number one, help the victim through the court system, through getting injunctions and stay away, judgments from the court, and then actually being able to protect them from the spouses who ignore those stay away orders and things like that. And that's our biggest problem. And one more thing that I found that's not unique to Key Biscayne, but it's unique to South Florida. With the influx of people from different countries, there are, I hate to say it, accepted practices of domestic violence where there's cultural beliefs that if you want to put your hands on, you have a right to put your hands on. And what our cops have faced in the past is when we go to arrest an abusive husband, we fight the wife too. Because the wife feels that he does have, she doesn't like it, but she accepts it as part of their cultural upbringing. So, yes, sir. For instance, we had somebody from a very large South American country, very wealthy person in, I want to say, the Ocean Club. And there was some kind of major violence going on in the room. So when the officers knocked on the door, they were met with a very aggressive male who literally told them, in my culture, if I want to kick my wife's butt, and he was a little more, direct than that, I'll do it. And she was battered. We went to arrest him. The fight went on, and she started screaming and jumped on the back of one of our police officers, hitting the cop and saying, "Don't take my husband to jail." A lot of these abusive husbands are big providers. It's kind of like the culture you see in athletics. And we see a lot of these big athletes, and they're being arrested for DV, but they're never prosecuted because at the end of the day, they provide for the moms and the children. And if you arrest them and they lose that multi-million-dollar contract, they can't provide. So those are the things that we have faced. The great thing about Miami-Dade County is we have a domestic violence court that's very strong. Kathy Rundle, our state attorney, believes very deeply in protecting the rights of DV victims. And so she has strengthened the court with state attorneys. And maybe I could reach out to Kathy and we could actually bring Kathy here to do a town hall or to do a seminar. She loves talking about things like that. Maybe we could do that.
Well, the other thing, though, great, everything you're saying, but I would like to start earlier, start in the schools and teach all the students that there are direct signs before they ever get involved in a relationship. So then if they're dating somebody that's controlling and, doesn't want them to have other friends, there's a whole list. I've looked it up quite a bit. And if they could just be taught that, which would be a few
I'll
classes.
have Sergeant Santiago talk to the principals, and I'll get back with you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty.
Hello, Chief Press. And Sergeant Zayas always greets me with a smile and a hello and how are you, even if he doesn't remember my first name, as does probably the entire Key Biscayne police force anytime I see any of them. So where I think they'd be hard-pressed to remember maybe even 10 names with this roster of duties that they are juggling full-time, I would say they're always met with politeness and a big smile and a great greeting. So kudos to your department. I really want to know how to give the police department more tools here in Key Biscayne to fight crime. And Mike Davey, I think, has already left, but in the last town hall meeting, I brought up the subject of high-tech security cameras at our entry block. And he full-heartedly supported that idea, thought it was a wonderful idea, as did every single person in this room in the last town hall meeting. And I'm not sure whatever became of that discussion because everyone thought it was such a wonderful idea and could be a great tool to help the Key Biscayne Police Department. As you said, we only have one way on, one way off. And unless someone's coming onto the island on a boat to commit the crime, chances are they're coming on with a vehicle. And I think you and I have talked that you would like to see something like that. And I'm just wondering how we could get the wheels turning for our council members to look into the cost of that and get it implemented, because I think a community of this size that's more than doubled, and with the crime that's taking place on the island, this is not only a deterrent, but a huge tool, I would think, to help the police department with extra sets of high-tech eyes looking to these vehicles coming on and off the quay. And in my personal experience, I know that it could have helped because I could have identified the vehicle in a crime that was related to me I knew the time, I knew the vehicle, I could identify everything. And I had no idea that our cameras are only giving tickets. They're not actually watching the cars.
Well, I can help you on that. Thanks to the council's support, we were able to put a license plate reader at the entranceway to the village. So we now look at every vehicle that comes into the village. Those tags are processed, and if they're driven by fugitives that have been identified in the national or the state system, they let us know that. If they're stolen cars, they let us know that. If they've been involved, and here's where it kind of gets tricky, like a lot of times they'll say the person has a suspended driver's license. Well, if you look at the statistics in the state of Florida, I think they said 50% of all people driving cars in the state of Florida have suspended DLs. 50%, and I believe the number is higher. It's frightening. We would be stopping cars all day long, checking to see if they've got a suspended driver's license. Half the drivers that we stop that don't even realize they did. They didn't pay a citation. They missed a court appearance. They're given an automatic suspension. They're transient. They don't get the notice, etc. And some are just bad guys who just don't care about the law. But we do have those cameras there now. We also have the LPRs on Mashta Island. I've had discussions with the village manager about face recognition. This is something that they used big time in New York City as one of the greatest deterrents they have, because that is the most targeted city in the world, as we all know. But this is Key Biscayne, and just getting a license plate reader took me quite a few years to convince the community that we're not looking into your cars, that it only focuses on the license plate, and it'll show what kind of car it is, obviously, because it's the back portion of the car. But the idea of privacy is important to so many people that we don't want to create that police state mindset. But if that's what the village wants, we've got a great council. I'm sure they would consider it if they got enough people to support that, and that's the way they wanted to go. Anything that we can get to our advantages, and I've always said this about crime prevention. We've got 72 sets of eyes. You have 26,000 sets of eyes. Crime prevention starts with the community. And if you see something, you say something. And that's why we encourage so much for you all to call us. So it's a great thought. I would suggest finding a champion on the council who may want to support that. And you have my support, because the majority of crimes that we have solved here came because your neighbors have great security systems, and they've allowed us to actually see, visualize, create a photograph, pass it around, and identify bad guys, either the car or the perpetrator themselves. So it is a tremendous tool, and thanks for bringing that up.
You're welcome. And so in furthering that, can you bring this to the council's attention? Because I've already brought it to Mike, and I'd like to see somebody in the council tackle this issue to get to see if we can get security cameras at our entry block, not just reading license plates, to capture if somebody steals a boat, kidnaps a child, does something more than just a license plate reader, because it's one way on, it's one way off. And I think safety overrides privacy.
Yes, we will bring it forward for discussion.
Next question.
There's a lawsuit going on in Coral Gables right now, specifically about a privacy issue with their
license plate reader system. Remember, can you just explain for the community what's going on there?
Sure.
And why, number one, we wouldn't have that problem, and that these are some issues that we need to consider when we're looking at putting cameras in place, because it gets a little more complicated than I completely understand what you're saying. But if you could just explain what's going on in the Gables so that they would have an understanding
Absolutely.
of that too.
What they're being accused of is tracking people. So understand that every time you go by a license plate reader, it identifies your car, what direction it's going in, and what time it came, and on the way out. So we have LPRs coming in and LPRs going out. Gables has them all throughout the city of Coral Gables. So there are some residents, one in particular, who felt that he was being tracked and thus his civil rights were being violated because you could tell when he was coming, when he was going. And here's the caveat, that information was shared with other police departments. We have total control of our cloud. And unless it's a violent felony, God forbid, we don't share any of our LPR information. So that's why the Gables is dealing with that. And that's literally going to be a huge challenge for a privacy right. And I don't know what the answer is. I do know this. We're not looking at people. We're not tracking people. It's not what we don't have the time to do that. We're just looking for bad guys coming into your community and knowing that it gives us the heads up, gives us an opportunity to solve the crime before the crime occurs. Thanks for bringing that up. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Well, so you're talking about one paranoid individual.
But Christina, it's a huge lawsuit, and you do have people who are supporting that because there is this paranoia that Big Brother is watching. But what I want you all to understand, every time you come into that causeway, Big Brother's watching you. You go to that SunPass, they tag you. You leave. By the way, you see those big octopuses that are in the middle of the causeway now that say Miami-Dade Police on them? Right? Right there on Bearcut Bridge. When you come past Bearcut Bridge or when you park in the parking lot at Hobie Beach, those are LPRs. They're tracking you. When you go down and you're in the express lane, they're tracking you. When you're on the turnpike, they're tracking you. Everywhere you go, when those little lights flash, they don't only charge you money, they know where you are, when you are, and how you are, and how fast you're going.
And going to your point about the neighbor's surveillance, something like that.
Right.
My only point is, when something has occurred, if you're lucky to have a neighbor's surveillance camera.
It's a great tool.
It's a great tool. So all I'm saying is to bring a greater tool to Key Biscayne, to our entry block area where the cars are coming and going. And if a crime was committed, chances are, or hopefully it got.
If we had an LPR, we would have been able to pinpoint that car exactly. No, we do, but her crime occurred before that.
What's an LPR is what?
License plate reader.
I'm asking for something more than a license.
You want us to look into the cars?
Or to see the car.
It does see the car. It just doesn't look into the passenger section of the car.
Okay. Can it, if the car stole.
When you get a chance, so that we give everybody an opportunity, I'll bring you to our communications area, and I invite anybody over there. There is a huge TV in there. They're not watching soap operas. They're watching about 20 pictures of every car that's coming and going in Key Biscayne, live. And if it alerts that dispatcher immediately. The cops have it on their laptops. It alerts them, and they could do things about it. So you'll be able to see exactly what we see, okay? And we can use those LPRs to backtrack and extrapolate whatever information we can through video. It's a great tool. It's the way of the world. Pardon?
We don't, but I won't waste the floor because what I thought I was suggesting is something extremely beneficial to the police department. But we don't need to talk about it anymore. I understand what an LPR.
Yes, ma'am. License plate reader.
That wasn't exactly what I was suggesting. I was talking about when you talk about safety on a college campus and kids and something much more high tech. That's what I was suggesting.
Something that would capture video in much more detail and give you more.
It would probably capture your face, and it would,
And I mean, are you suggesting that that's something that we could do?
Of course we could. But yes, it's called facial recognition. They're using it all over the United States.
Because if somebody commits a crime, you want that person who committed the crime.
But again, I will say this. My opinion is it's helpful, but This is a council decision and a village decision, not a police chief decision. I will do whatever it is the village directs me to do. Yes, sir.
Yes, Chief. Would you elaborate on the difference between the golf carts rules and automobile rules?
Well, the only difference is golf carts have limited access to our roadways. Okay, our main roadway.
Do they have the same seatbelt rules?
Yes, they do.
And the lights and the license plates?
Yes, they
and
do.
everything else? All right.
Yes, sir.
Now, you and I have had this
So
conversation.
we have.
The council on 3 occasions have given mandated to enforce these rules. How many people here see violations every day with those things? All right. How can we help you to help your officers to start enforcing these rules?
So in the past year, we wrote 278 moving violations on golf carts.
I can show you 10 times.
I understand that. I understand that. What I'll say is we have limited amounts of police officers who have to prioritize how we enforce and what we enforce. Those priorities are based on safety and expediency and actually being out there always looking specifically for those things. So I've driven around and I see something, I stop it. Pete sees something, he stops it. Brett stopped somebody the other day. Jason's active out there. If we see it, we stop it. We have a very kind of iffy thing going on here in the village. You could really hurt a kid, a good kid, who's only out there because his mom and dad let him drive that golf cart, and they shouldn't have. But we could hurt that kid's opportunity to get a driver's license. And these are the types of things that you really have to balance as a police department. I don't want us to be known as a bunch of guys who stroke everybody and kids be damned and parents be damned and everybody goes, because we could do that. We could write tickets till we're bluer than our uniforms. But we try to talk to them. We try to call parents. We have thought about towing a car. If I decide I stop a golf cart and it's got a kid, so I call the parents are working, but they have to come get that kid because that kid can't drive the golf cart. But I decide I want to tow that golf cart, write tickets to the child, and write tickets to the parents. I could do all of the above. But that cop gets tied up for 45 minutes to an hour taking this 15-year-old kid who was on the golf cart with his parents knowing it, towing the thing, doing offense incident report. And I lost a cop for almost an hour on something that I could prioritize that officer to be doing elsewhere. And I'm not saying it's not something we don't need to do. We do. But I think somebody doing 50 miles an hour down Grapetree is a lot more dangerous than one of our kids doing 15 miles an hour on Fernwood.
How about doing wheels, going the maximum speed that these things are going over bumps and going around corners? I've seen it happen, officer.
No, I'm not doubting that. So if our officer was there and our officer saw that, they would write that.
But you say you have cameras all over the place.
No, I never said that.
You're not saying that.
In the entranceway, I've got a license plate reader. That's it. Whatever car comes into the village, it records, and then I've got one as we leave. That's the only place we've got cameras other than Marsh Island, sir.
The only problem I have with this whole thing is that an officer is making a decision, what do I do with this poor little kid, 15 years old, whose parents really don't give a crap about him, are not training him or anything else. I don't want to hurt his future by not screwing up his life. I mean, he has no right to do that. All right, he doesn't. It's not under his jurisdiction. If the kid is riding illegally, write him up. All right? And that's what the council has told you.
And
And I want to help you how to do this.
Okay.
Please.
I appreciate that. But can I respond to that, please? And then we'll move on. Police officers, by statute, have a right to use discretion. Our world should never be black and white, because if we decide to police in black and white here, and if you violate that law by 1 mile an hour, if you don't use your turn signal, imagine that. We'd run out of ticket books, okay? If we did everything everybody does wrong, we would need 20 more cops a day to do nothing but that. So, no, but what I'm trying to tell you is we have to allow these officers to use their discretion. Every situation is different. It's not just as simple as writing everybody. And I'm sorry, sir, for 45 years, I've never lived that life. And I don't expect my officers to. And I understand. No, you're wrong. When they see that, they cite those people. We've got 278 citations for these violations you talked about. It isn't like we've got zero. And on top of that, and I wish I could get it, and do me a favor, leave me your number, because I'll tell you how many golf cart details we work out there. And those are where our officers specifically go out there just looking for golf cart violations. And if they see them, they write them. If they're bad violations, if they're borderline, they warn them. I know that.
I don't want to stop people that are making a wrong signal or something. I'm talking with lights. They're riding at 9 o'clock at night. They're 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. They're driving 8-hour cars. That's what I'm talking about.
I understand. I do.
That's what I don't want to say.
I don't want to see it either. And I don't think our cops, if they see that, allow that to happen.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Jay Novick. Before I ask my question, I just want to say I've been a fan of yours since you were at the beach as a career prosecutor, and I think you're doing a great job, and I'm really impressed with your presentation tonight. But here's my question. I was away, as I always am in the summer, but I got the notices on my phone about the incident on the Rickenbacker. And as it progressed, I, of course, was calling friends of mine who live here and were here, and they were stuck in it. So I was hearing live from them about it. And it really concerned me. I mean, I felt good that I was not here and I was away and I wasn't in it, but I felt really, really bad for my fellow residents who were stuck in that. What I want to know from you is what progress has been made with the city, with the county, et cetera, since that incident, so that we don't have to go through it again. I mean, some of the things I thought of, there should have been a plan years ago when something like that happens, where at least one lane was opened either direction, or, I mean, I don't know. Could you help me out with that?
I would love to.
Thank you.
This
made?
last incident really brought it to a head.
Awful, awful.
I reached out to the director of the Miami-Dade Police Department and to the chief of the City of Miami Police Department, who have jurisdiction on that causeway. We have we have mutual aid, but they own the jurisdiction on those causeways. So they dictate what goes on. We don't tell them, they tell us. They work with us when they can. So I asked them for permission to allow, in an incident like that, the Key Biscayne Police Department, providing we don't have a major crime scene. Now, keep in mind, folks, a traffic homicide, hear the word homicide, that is a major crime scene. The implications of that could lead to somebody spending their entire life in jail, to massive lawsuits, to court cases that go on and on and on, and require perfect reconstruction of what could be as insane a scene, as you well know, just like the last one we had where that poor young woman lost her life. So if it's so large that it's spread in places that is uncontrollable, yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
It is. Because we not only had the original accident, but then we had a vehicle run the gauntlet, hit another car inside of that, race away from the cops. So now we've got a completely different scene. They moved evidence. They destroyed parts of the crime scene. So they had to start from scratch again. But to answer your question, They agreed that they would allow the village of Key Biscayne to dictate how we can open some of these streets up. My next step was to meet with Mr. Jimmy Martinsack, who oversees the causeway for Miami-Dade County. Jimmy is working, and he's only got himself and one other person. He has created right now, I think I have a 14-screen document. We broke the entire causeway down into X amount of areas, looking at how we can take an accident, if it happened here, where we could go, if it happened there, where we could go. And so we are in the process of doing that. Once we do that, we have to come up with a memorandum of understanding, which I believe the two other entities have already agreed to. And Jimmy already told me that we, Key Biscayne, would have the keys to his place over there where we can get to his cones and his barricades, and we could reroute. And he would trust our officers to do the same. In fact, if you remember when that bicyclist was shot and killed up there, and the city of Miami obviously had a homicide scene on top of a bridge. There's nowhere to go on top of a bridge. But in order to get traffic rerouted, while all the cops were up there reconstructing the scene, Lieutenant Zayas took it upon himself to direct the city of Miami and Miami-Dade to help him gather a bunch of cones. They had a bunch of cops putting out cones. That was our guy who did it. It was also our cop who was the first responder on that scene, made the arrest, and assisted the victim. So unfortunately, because of the lack of manpower out there on the causeway, our cops respond more to these major events, and then we have no control of them. We're trying to change that right now. So that is all in a process. It's not going to happen in a day. It's a big deal. You're talking about having to move barriers. You've got all those tree trunks, right? The little things that used to be totem poles or telephone poles that we're actually going to have to look into replacing. There's cost to that so that you can take them out, open the traffic, get it through, and do things like that. So I think you're going to see that. I believe the county appreciates us doing that. The city said they'd be more than willing and takes the hammer off of their head, and we're pushing forward on that.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate you making progress on that.
Thank you.
Louisa Conway, I want to thank you very much for tonight. This was really super informative.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I feel I got really educated on what it is that you do and the police officers do. But I'd like to ask you about the no chase policy.
Right.
And I'd love for you to just elaborate on that and explain, because I sort of agree with you on the whole idea of not chasing in a community like ours. But one of the things that concerned me, like it made sense to me, but one thing that concerned me was once that was out there, that there was no chase, the first thing I thought about is does this mean we're going to have like all these people coming and committing crime in Key Biscayne, whether it's, stealing cars because they know I can drive away with this car and no one is going to stop me. And this is just a thought, but I'm really interested to hear from you. Not just because I understand the premise of the policy, but I'd like to understand, like, how do you work with the city of Miami, and how does, once you've made that decision, okay, we're not going to chase, this is a robbery or whatever, what's the impetus and how does this get carried out? And do you make a different decision if it's like a kidnapping and somebody's in the car? If you could elaborate on that.
Great question. And the answer is yes, we do. So the mandate for chases in our policy and in all accredited agencies is that a chase in a car is tantamount to the use of deadly force. That police car traveling at 70, 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, those subjects driving the same, a $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 6,000-pound automobile at high speeds is tantamount to what the state identifies as deadly force. Deadly force is the last thing and the last result of any police work that we do. Therefore, the policy says, unless it involves a major violent felony, unless the subject is known as a major violent felon and you believe that he is going to continue to commit these heinous crimes, you can engage, and as soon as that subject takes off, and you know it's not a heinous violent crime, can't shoot him, can't chase him, can't do anything. And the policies are clear. They're the national standard for police chases. And again, I'm not quite sure if y'all are aware, but a week ago, unfortunately, Miami-Dade Police Department engaged in a chase of a stolen car. Subjects ran at Northeast, I believe, 135th Street and 7th Avenue. There was a young woman and her fiance got T-boned by the bad guys who ran a red light. The young woman was killed. Her fiance is brain dead, and there's a family that's destroyed over a stolen car. And those are things that, in my mind, and I'm not up here to second guess, criticize what other police departments do. But I've been a cop long enough to know that we don't always do it right, and we make mistakes out there. And there was a chase a few weeks ago that everybody's heard about that started in Coral Gables. And by the way, that chase involved a violent felony. Shots fired. You got bad guys who kidnapped the driver of that UPS truck. But when the chase came to a stop, there were hundreds of innocent people directly involved in the line of fire. And over 200 shots were fired. And 2 innocent people died. And bad things are going to come out of that chase. And I believe policies will even become more strict, and the use of our weapons will become even more strict. But the idea is to protect not only the police officers involved, to protect you when you're coming home from Miami Beach and you go to a play and you're enjoying your night out, and some lunatic is doing 140 miles an hour in some souped-up BMW trying to get away from us, and he takes your family out. I, for one, have seen enough really bad things in my career. I can't live with that, and I can't support any policy, and neither does any major police department in the state of Florida support that policy. Now, let's get to the bad guys know it part, right? Since that night, and since we changed the way we do business on the midnight shift, and I am certain anybody who drives around after 10 or 11 at night notices those police cars at our entranceway. We've not had one. We've not had one because we are staring into the face, not one stolen car, not one burglary, since we changed the way we do our policing. Because we realize it's one road in and one road out. Now keep in mind, there's an impact to what we do there. We just lost a cop from patrolling the interior of the streets because they're out there. But we haven't had a crime since. So I believe that we made the right decision, and policing will always be proactive and reactive. When there is no crime and things start to settle down a little bit, we can do more community policing things. We could put more cops out in bicycles. We could engage our people more. When poop hits the fan, that's when we kind of shut ourselves down. We become very focused on hardcore policing, looking for people, tracking what people do, wanting to know who's coming into the village of Key Biscayne, and making a professional decision on whether they feel that that person is suspicious enough and doing some type of activity that lawfully allows us to stop that car. So it's such a difficult decision to make. And I can tell you this too, there ain't a cop in America that wants to let a bad guy go when he runs from him. And I have been involved in a dozen high-speed chases. They're wild, they're crazy, they're dangerous. The adrenaline flows, your brain gets wild. You just can't imagine that experience. But when it results in the wrong thing, then all of that goes to waste. And by the way, legally, by having this policy, we actually help reduce our liability costs. I spoke to our insurance people, and they said absolutely policies by police departments to curtail certain activities, i.e. use of force, those types of things, chase policies, anything where we're hand-on with other people, they actually reduce the liability of the village. So taxpayers pay less in their insurance costs. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Are we able to keep our officers?
Are we able to keep our officers? We probably maintained the best staffing in the last 8-9 years that we've had since the 15 years I've been here. I think our officers are thankful to the people of the village, the councils who have provided them with benefits that they feel very happy about. They're content here. They've got a great public to police. They've got a beautiful environment to police. We're not perfect, but we've got probably one of the best teams I've ever seen. And this is where they want to police. They're not using this as a stepping stone like a lot of small police departments become, because they don't actively do things to keep their cops engaged and to make them want to work in areas. So when they come here, our background process is very extreme. It's very difficult for them, but we make sure we find the right cop for the VIT here in Key Biscayne so they know when to hold them, when to fold them. I haven't seen an IA complaint in I don't know how long. We have no use of force reports. We do our job, and we do it as professional as any group I've been around. So
We appreciate it.
thank you.
Chief,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. I now enervate, or at least it upsets me. You get upset. It is dangerous to go in our streets, walk your dog. People speed. What is the speed limit in the inside?
20 miles an hour,
20 miles an hour.
period,
Anywhere,
on the inside, on our interior streets.
including Harbor
30
Drive.
miles an hour on Crandon, 30 on
30
Crandon.
on Crandon.
Okay.
But all inside.
Right.
Now, the maids that drive the golf carts, are they supposed to have a driver's license?
Everybody who drives a golf cart is required to have a Florida driver's license
And-
or a driver's license from their country if they're not a permanent resident. Required.
And these extra large golf carts, do people understand that they don't fit and they cannot park? They block Fernwood. The mothers that block one lane, as I told you, on Crandon Boulevard at 5:30 because they're picking their child and they cannot make the time to look for a parking space. What do you do?
You know what frustrates me the most, Ceci, is when people see these things and they go on chats, they take pictures and they say, look at this idiot parking. And look at this person doing that. And then they show me the picture like 5 days later. So I'm going to ask you politely, and I'm going to ask everybody who's listening, our people love to take care of business. Call 365-5555.
I've done
Say
that.
you've got an illegal parker. If we have a unit available, they will go over there if they are into the street. And by the way, cops get more complaints from people when they write a parking ticket than if you write them a speeding ticket for doing 100 miles an hour. I don't know why that is, but I was a motorcycle cop and I hated riding parkers because people love to yell and scream at cops writing that parking ticket. We're willing to do it. Call us. That's all I ask.
That's it, please.
Call us. You see it, you call us. we'll send somebody out there.
And what happens? You give them a warning?
No, because they're not sitting in their golf carts, so there's nobody to warn. If the golf cart is obstructing traffic or a car is obstructing traffic, we will cite that parked golf cart or that parked vehicle. Just call us.
Sir?
Are there any rules on political signage in the village? Just as we go into 2020, we've got a big election. What are the local codes? I'm a new Key Biscayne resident and just wondering what the regulations are on yard signs and how that's policed.
There are code ordinances on certain signs, and they have to be a certain size and location. They can't be in certain public places. But here's the biggest part of it: you can't steal them either, and people steal the signs all the time over here.
But
so.
Is that something that anyone that you guys? I'm assuming that's not really worth a lot.
Well, it's a code issue unless we actually catch them stealing the signs. That's theft. It's property, okay? And in that case, we would most likely write a promise to appear. We're not going to take them and waste cops 2 hours dragging them down to jail. But they will be arrested and sign their name that they're going to appear in court. And they can only do that if they have an established residence here in Key Biscayne or here in Miami, and we can identify them. So if they don't show up in court, we can put a warrant in the system.
Sure.
On that note, also, what are the rules as far as like gatherings for rallies, political activity in general? What are the regs as far as like
the rule of thumb is if you're going to have a large gathering and it's going to create some type of an obstruction of a park or a walkway or an easement, things like that, that you go and you request a permit to have a rally. And that's done through, again, our code enforcement up there. People get a permit and they show up. We prefer when they reach out to us, because these things can be contentious at times. We would like to at least know about it, have a presence. But it's by law, you're allowed to do it, but it's got to be done the right way through a permitting system.
If it's okay, I'm just going to ask, I think the question might be for you. Given about the 2 million visitors that we have and traffic congestion, where are we on the smart lights?
Oh, I could tell you that.
Oh, you can. Okay.
We are now in the absolute last stage of the smart lights. Your lights right now are adapting to the traffic flows. They're doing their counts. They're processing those counts, feeding that information into the Miami-Dade County computers. And we don't know when we'll have a live date, but it takes anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks to get a proper count and an idea of our true flows of traffic. That being said, it's been a brutal 4.5-year process. It's not the panacea, folks. It's 30,000 cars a day on one road in and one road out. But what it will do is it'll make those exasperating delays when it's 12 in the afternoon and you're sitting there at Key Colony and nobody's coming out and you're there for 20 minutes waiting, or McIntyre, it moves traffic. When it's high traffic volume time, when the state park empties at 7 o'clock on a Sunday or a holiday, and there are thousands of cars moving through the village and trying to get off the causeway, it just can't push cars where cars can't go. So it will give us 10 times better than we've already had, but you will still find that on those high peak times, it'll still be a bit slow coming in and going out.
Can I just ask you really
Please.
quick to that? Would you be willing to, when we have that type of congestion, having our traffic officers take over?
We are told specifically by the county and by the people who put these systems in that if we stop and we change the traffic flow and we take over the lights, that we ruin the adaptive technology. And by ruining it, it's still there, but it has to start all over again. So their suggestion is, unless you have a critical incident, at which time we wouldn't need them to tell us that, we would move traffic through. The idea is to let this thing play itself out. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What is your responsibility within the condo?
Same responsibility we have everywhere else. Here's the interesting thing, and I've had many discussions with Mr. Camejo, let's say, for instance, from Key Colony. It takes our cops 10 minutes to get into Key Colony because we're in that same line that everybody else is in. I told him, just like I suggested to the condo association, if you give us fobs or whatever it takes as residents to get in and out of your communities, and you invite us in, because there are communities that kind of don't really want police officers always around there, and they've made it clear. But the ones who do want us, all I ask is that they treat us like a resident. Give us access. Why wouldn't you do that? You know, so we could arrive on a call at Key Colony in 30 seconds and spend 10 minutes waiting not only to get in, but that when we do get in, having to wait for an elevator, go up to that call and knock on that door. Whereas if we have immediate access, like a resident, and they all blow right through, which is great, that'll expedite our going through there. And we've started, by the way, part of our bicycle program, because we can go past the gates and we don't have to wait for them, is to just go in and start doing a lot more bicycling in the condo communities, because I think that's a better way for us to police those. And that's part of their quote-unquote directed patrol when they go out there. It's a good question. Anybody else? Well, I would love to thank you all for coming out tonight. I know this is your time also. I'm going to close with one thing. I know policing in South Florida, and you have some of the finest men and women ever to put on a uniform that are watching your families and wanting to take care of you. And I don't say that just because I'm their chief. I say it because I see what they do every day. They have empathy. They care. They work hard here. They keep their mouth shut, their eyes open, and they go out there and they do their job, and they protect you, and they protect your rights, and they protect the rights of everybody, because that's part of what we do. So thank you. God bless you, and have a great night.